Are you tired of working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, not making that much money, and then you see Clive over here working 30 or 40 hours a week, making 2 to 3 times the sales you are? Well, if that's you, I'm going to show you why Clive is kicking your butt and show you how to kick his butt. So how do you win at the productivity game as a salesperson, sales professional? Doesn't matter if you sell B2C, B2B, door-to-door, B2G, it's all the same. The first thing that you want to focus on, regardless of what you sell, is what we call income producing activities. All right, let me repeat that. Income producing activities. Now, what I always saw the Clive do, all right, in my example, because I would say I was probably the Clive, is I was only focused on income producing activities, where I would notice that 99% of the other salespeople in the offices that I sold at, they were on their phones looking at social media. An email would pop up every 10 minutes. They would stop what they were doing, stop their cold calling or stop whatever they were doing, go to their email, respond to the email, then come back to cold calling. And they were like little squirrels, like just, no, I would say they were like leaves, just the wind would blow in and they would just kind of blow out all over the place, and they had no structure to their day. And they'd end up working 60, 70 hours, 80 hours a week and not making any money. And I'm like, that's not smart. So you want to be like Clive. So I'm going to show you how to be like Clive, which in this example was me as a sales professional. So I only focused on income producing activities. Because if you're a salesperson, where do you make money? When you're talking to prospects, right? Because you make commissions. So if you're not talking to prospects, or maybe even like, getting ready, like if you sold B2B, like getting ready to, present in front of a boardroom of decision makers, like actually going over what you're going to say and what you're going to ask, you are not focused on income producing activities, all right? I would notice that most of the salespeople that worked in the companies I worked for, they would, every time an email would come in, they would get distracted, they would respond to that email, then they would go back to cold calling or calling outbound leads, then another email would come in 10 minutes later, they would get off the phone, go back to that email, back and forth, they'd pick up their phone, look at their Facebook or whatever, for 15 minutes, then they would go to the bathroom. Then after the bathroom, they would come into the break room, and there would be like all the broke salespeople that would blame the company, blame the leads, the product sucks, my prospects are always broke, help me. And they would sit there and drink their coffee for another 20 minutes. Then they just waste all that time. And they thought they were working 10, 12, 14 hours a day, but if you really went over how many hours they were doing this, you'd be shocked. It was maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 hours a day out of that 12-hour a day. And they would look at me, because I'd work like 7 hours, sometimes 8, and I was making, well, do you want me to tell you? I was making multiple 6 figures a month in commissions. Let me repeat that, multiple 6 figures a month in commissions. We're talking about a couple $100,000 a month in commissions, and most of them were making 3, 4, 5, maybe 7 or 8 grand a month if they were lucky, working twice as many hours. How do we do it? All right, so I'm going to show you income producing activities. So what I would do is I focused on a technique, okay, and a lot of people talk about this. I've seen even the other sales trainers talk about it. It's called the PTB. It's prospect time blocking, okay? So what I mean by prospect time blocking is I'd have certain hours in the day where I would cold call. Okay, and then right after that hour was done, when I got off the phone with that last prospect, then I might have the next hour I was calling outbound leads, people who had responded to some social media that leads had come in, okay, name, email, phone number. Now, in the companies that I worked for, that I'm giving an example of, we didn't have many of those. It was mainly prospecting, like cold outreach, all right? So if you're a salesperson that only gets outbound leads, name, email, phone number, you would prospect time block times in the day to call those leads, all right? So I had my day structured 100%, 7 to 8 hours straight, hardly any breaks, because I was focused on producing activity. So prospect time blocking. Now I even had a little sign on my door. It would like those little door hangers, the things you have on the hotels that says do not disturb, and it said prospect time blocked. Do not come in unless 911. And nobody would knock on my office door because I knew I was actually working, all right? Now, so let me give you an example. Let's say from in the morning, I would have times where I would check emails. So I'd always check my emails 3 times a day. I would check it usually around 7 in the morning, okay, for about 10, 15 minutes. Then I would have about a 15-minute break, usually right before I had my lunch break, which usually my lunch break I'd take about 10 or 15 minutes, because why would I take an hour off income-producing activities? I make no money doing that. That's a whole nother story. So about 11:45 in the morning, I'd check my emails again, and then I would check it once again before I left the office, maybe 4, 4:35, depending on when I was leaving. There might be some days I worked even longer, maybe 6. Always going to check it before I leave. Now, that being said, if there was a really, really important email that came in, prospect email back, we're ready to go, call me back in 2 minutes, I had an assistant. Yes, when you get really good at sales, you can hire an assistant. Actually, that company hired me an assistant, and my assistant would come in, hey, you got an email from XYZ, make sure you get back to him, and then I would obviously change my schedule to do that, all right? So I'm not saying you never check your emails, but, just block it off, all right? So you're not checking every 5 minutes when an email comes in. You waste so much time, especially in social media, right? So make sure you schedule your day. Let's say, and it depends on what you sell, maybe from 8 to 10 in the morning. If you're in an industry where you cold call, that's what you're doing, cold calling. Maybe from 10 to 11, you're getting back with prospects that didn't buy. Maybe from 12 to 2, you've now scheduled meetings with inbound, with leads that you had cold called, that then scheduled on your calendar, right? It just depends on what you sell. Or maybe if you did inbound leads, you've got a certain part of the day that's scheduled only for inbound, and then 3 hours a day you're cold calling, or you're calling back people who didn't buy, okay? What I'm suggesting is you just block off the times that's best for you. And if you stick to that structure, it's almost like a factory. It's like just factory. It's like you're putting together the Mercedes, and it just spits out good things, lots of sales, lots of prospects that are helped. So focus on prospect time blocking. Now, like I said, there's going to be times when you're time blocking where you're going to call outbound. You might even be lucky if you're in an industry that has inbound leads. A couple of the industries I sold in, I'd usually get maybe 30% inbound, and let's say maybe another 30% outbound, and then maybe the other 40% was just cold calling that I would bring in, qualify, and then book on my calendar, all right? Now, you can also focus on referrals. So I had times during the day where I was calling back clients who had just, had their problem solved, and once again, that's more industry specific, but let's say if you sold, cybersecurity to banks, you'd want to make sure to get referrals that you call after the problem was solved, not like not before. So you might want to call that prospect back and find out kind of obviously stay in touch, what's going on, and then ask for referrals. So I'd have times during the week where I would call back clients to get referrals. I made probably, I'm going to go out on a limb here, I could be off, but I bet probably 20% of all my sales came from calling back clients who would refer me to other people. And that's a whole nother training that I can do for you another time. In fact, if you want to learn how to do referrals, you can actually go to our free Facebook group, salesrevolution.pro, and ask for referrals in there, and we can message it over to you. But we do a lot more industry-specific training in that Facebook group, so you're welcome to go there if you want to learn how to get better referrals, because I made a lot of money from that. Now, you're going to have times during that day where you're going to have times for, and I hate this word in sales, following up with prospects who did not buy. Maybe 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 months ago. Now, when you call them, don't say, hey, John, it's Jeremy Miner, I'm just following up with you, or I'm just checking in. Why do you not want to say those words? Because every salesperson says that to them that calls them or emails them. How many emails do you get from people soliciting to you where they're like, I'm just checking in, I'm just following up, and after you read those words, you don't read anymore. Be honest with yourself. You know what I mean. I get those every day. So don't use the words following up or checking in, because every salesperson that's also trying to sell them is also using that words. And if you use the same words like every other salesperson that they don't like, guess how they're going to view you? Probably not in a good way. Okay? Just getting back to you, or I just had time to get back to you, or I'm just getting back to you. There's different words you can relanguage that. All right? So the biggest point here is focus on income producing activities. Okay? If you want to get on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, my suggestion, do that after work, because during work, if you want to make a lot of money, you want to focus on actually making money, all right? So maybe if you're going to the bathroom, sitting down on the toilet, then you can get on your phone and Facebook. You can actually prospect time block that. I'm just joking, but you know what I mean. So focus on income producing activities, Stay away from email only 3 times a day, unless it's an emergency email that your company tells you about, okay, or if you get good, get an assistant and they'll show you that. And then stay away from checking every email every 10 minutes. Stay away from the company, I always call it the company club, all the negative salespeople that want you to go to lunch and then you stay out to lunch for 90 minutes to 2 hours. I always said no. I always brought my lunch, and I always ate my lunch at my desk, which would take me about 10 minutes. And then I was back to what? Income producing activities. And so what I would do is I would work that 7 to 8 hours a day while everybody else was working like 10 to 12, and I was making like 20 times more, all right? So it's not just about, time blocking and income producing activities. It's what questions are you asking? How are you using your tonality? How are you getting to lower their guard? How are you seeding certain things that you say and ask that actually prevent most of the objections you lose deals from? Then if you do get a concern here and there, how do you help the prospect overcome it? But it's a combination of focusing on income producing activities and actually your sales ability. And you do that, you can work far less. Okay, there were sometimes on Fridays, okay, where I would come into the office and I would leave at noon. And guess what? Do you think my sales manager or the VP of sales or even the chief sales officer cared if Jay Miner left at noon on a Friday when I was making them tens of millions of dollars in sales every month? No. You can have a lot of flexibility when you're the top salesperson in your company and the entire industry. How do you get there? You're not born with it, right? You have to acquire those skills, all right? So focus on income producing activities and acquiring a much more advanced sales ability, and you're going to do exceptionally better than you are right now, and you're going to have a lot more fun and work less hours. There you go.